Hello everyone, it's review time. And today we're gonna be talking about a sci-fi action film called Edge of Tomorrow. Be ready for some spoilers ahead. Some time ago aliens arrived on Earth via asteroids and conquered most of Europe. Humanity built exoskeleton suits for soldiers to fight against this threat. The main character, Cage, is a media relations officer who arrived in a helicopter to receive his next mission from the general. They're trying to unite their forces to defeat the aliens that call mimics, and they want Cage to film the war. Cage refuses and claims that he has no combat experience. The general warns him that this is an order he must comply with since he came from the upper ranks. Cage tries to blackmail the general and it seems to have worked. He walks outside the office, and the general orders an arrest for Cage. He runs like a coward but is tasered and brought to the warship. He wakes up on a pile of luggages and is greeted by the sergeant and Master Sergeant Pharaoh. He tries to explain his rank and demands to make a phone call. Federal agrees to take him but Cage realizes that it's a lie. The Master Sergeant takes out the paperwork that claims Cage is a deserter and will do anything to get out of combat duty. He's taken into his new unit called the J Squad. The Master Sergeant finds through gambling activities and makes the whole squad eat up their cards. He tells the squad that Cage is a deserter and will likely run away. He makes the squad personally responsible for his behavior at the dismay of everyone. Cage puts on the actual suit with his teammates but has no idea how to operate it. He sees the crazy behaviors from his teammates, which doesn't come for him one bit. Cage tries to weasel out of it and says he may hurt someone with his inexperience. But his teammates tells him he wouldn't, if he has the safety on. They march into the transport airplanes but Cage tries to run away again. On the airplane Cage tries to turn off his safety on the guns, but fails to do so. The floor opens up and they prepare to drop off. Before the sergeant can finish talking, they're hit by enemy fire. Everyone begins dropping off chaotically and dying at the same time. Cage hesitates and is left as the last person. He has no choice but to press to release just before the plane blows up. He faced land right on the beach and sees nothing but chaos. A plane drops right on top of one of his teammates and sent Cage flying. He gets up and tries to get his weapons working but the language seems to have been stuck on Japanese. He sees another plane falling towards him and dodges right on time which saved his life but killed everyone knows. He looks up and sees a woman fighting the mimics with a sword. She gets knocked back, but manages to kill the enemy. She walks towards Cage but gets shot and killed right in front of him. In fear, Cage starts running in the opposite direction but is stopped by the Master Sergeant. Their team regroups and it seems like their enemy knew they were coming. They barricade themselves in the ditch and waits for the enemies to come. Cage is still struggling to get his safety off but with no results. He looks on the ground and sees something moving. The mimics have already arrived to their location. The mimic is able to completely destroy their whole squad. Cage finally manages to get his weapons working and shoots at the mimic that destroyed his team. He manages to kill it but another one shows up that looks different from the rest. He tries to shoot it but is out of ammo. He grabs the bomb beside him and the mimic charges. He blows the aliens held off but the blood spills on Cage's mouth and face. He screams in agony but wakes up on the backs of luggages where he was earlier in time. He sees the bus drive by and recognizes the woman painted on the bus as the same person he saw on the battlefield. He is greeted the same way like last time and brought to his squad. The events happened exactly the same, except he now has the memory of the previous day and therefore you can predict the future to a certain point. He gets to the battlefield and meets the girl again but this time he saved her from being killed. However, Cage ends up wounded by the gunfire, and instead of saving him, the woman takes his battery and Cage is killed by the mimic. He wakes up in the same time again but this time he tries to convince the sergeant by telling him his personal information, which he couldn't have known. Otherwise, it doesn't work though, and he's struck to the J Squad. He tries to convince his teammates, but they think he's crazy and duct tapes his mouth. He gets on the beach and tries to save his teammates but gets crushed by the falling plane. He tries again and again, improving his skill every time he dies. Cage makes it to the woman and saves her from the mimics. After realizing Cage can predict the future, she drops her sword and tells him to find her when he wakes up. The explosion killed both of them. He goes back to his squad and helps them avoid being punished by their sergeants. He goes on training with his teammates and attempts to escape from the soldiers, but not really successful on his first try. He roll under the army truck and the voice detection from his sergeant. Cage finds the woman training in her division and walks up to tell her about what happened. We learned her name is Ritowski and she immediately realizes what's going on. She explains to Cage that what happened to Cage happened to her as well, but she lost her powers. You gain the power to reset time from an alpha, the blue mimic that Cage killed, by absorbing its blood. They arrive at the weapons repair department and meets Dr. Carter, a physicist and biologist specializing in mimic biology. He's the only one with the necessary knowledge about the mimics and the only one who believes Ritowski's story. He explains that mimics are like nervous systems and they are controlled by a center called the Omega. The Omega gifts Alpha the power to reset time every time one of them dies. Therefore, he always knows the future and can never lose the war. Even when humans do win against them, it was because they were allowed to win. When the Omega feels like it's losing its power, he would try to find human responsible, and that person will start having visions about the location of the Omega. Ritowski had this but she never made it there before she lost her blood. Since Case hasn't had any visions, they have time to prepare him. This training goes pretty bad in the beginning. Cage tries to fight the drones but it's not the way and breaks his back. Ritowski tells him that there's only one rule and that is to never lose his blood. He must make sure he dies before any blood transfusion can happen or he loses his power to reset time. Ritowski kills Cage every time he gets injured from his training, and eventually Cage begins having visions of the Omega. He describes this location to Dr. Carter and they plan their escape off the beach. They tried numerous times to plan carefully on escaping, but each time Ritowski would end up dead. Cage becomes frustrated and goes to London by himself to have a drink in the bar. He learns that after losing on the beach the mimics eventually takes over London as well. Cage goes back to training and is now extremely capable after many rounds of death. Dr. Carter figures out the location of the Omega, but Cage says it's not enough. No matter how hard they try they cannot seem to get off the beach. In one of the loops, he goes with Ritowski onto the beach and slaughters the mimics while his squad stares in amazement. They make it to the trailer park beside the beach, and plans to escape. Ritowski finds a caravan but forget to detaches its trailer. She drives to Cage and they both run off in the vehicle away from the incoming mimics. Just when they thought they were safe, a mimic pops out from inside the trailer. Cage manages to dispatch it, losing some dead weight in the process. Cage talked to Ritowski about her personal life which surprises her. It's obvious that this is not their first rodeo. The relationship must have been close in their previous loops. They run out of gas and arrives at a farmhouse. Case runs out of battery and leave his exoskeleton behind. They discover a helicopter behind the barn, and Ritowski wants Cage to fly it. But he says he's afraid of crashing. Ritowski grunts as she unties the helicopter, and Cage discovers a large wound that she has been hiding. He patches her up, but she keeps on insisting in finding the keys to the helicopter. Cage gives her some coffee and adds 3 sugars. Ritowski surprised that Case knows this. I had never told him. Which means that they have been here more than once. She pushes Case to tell her the truth and he reveals that he always had the keys. He doesn't want to start the flight because every time he does, Ritowski dies. She grabs the key and starts the helicopter. This triggers an attack which ultimately causes her to crash. Cage comes to find her and she dies in his arms. The neighboring mimics surround them and kills Cage as well. This time he wakes up and finds Ritowski but changes his mind about involving her in the journey. He packs extra ammo and battery and goes to the farmhouse by himself. He flies the helicopter and arrives at where the Omega is supposed to be. He goes deep into the facility but finds the Omega is missing. Instead mimics awaits for him and attacks him on sights. Cage notices that the mimics are not killing him but rather leading him out. He realizes that it was a trap and successfully trans himself to reset the time. He tells Carter and Ritowski that the visions are traps. The only way to find the Omega is to use a device that Carter built which relates to signal. But it was confiscated by the general. They make it back to the general and sneaks into the building. The general is surprised to see Cage and his most decorated soldier on the opposing side. Cage demonstrates that he knows the future and explains how they always lose the battle on the beach. He must use the device in the safe to take out the Omega, but the general never agrees no matter how many times they've tried. After convincing him this time, the general takes out the transponder and surprisingly gives it to Cage. They walk out of the building but the soldiers began attacking them again. They try to escape in a car, and Cage takes this opportunity to use the transponder. He links with the Omega and finds it in Paris. Before they can escape, they're knocked unconscious by an exosuit, and are taken into the hospital. When Cage wakes up, the nurse has already given him a blood transfusion. Ritowski tries to kill Case to reset the time, but he tells her that he no longer has that ability. They sneak out of the hospital and finds a teammate on J Squad. He convinces them to help this time with the presence of Ritowski. They steal a military aircraft and head toward Paris. Before they get to the building, they're attacked by numerous mimics. Their plane crashes killing most of their team. They regrouped and are very low on ammo and weapons. It seems like their chances of making it to the Omega is very low. Cage comes up with the idea to use crashed aircraft and the secondary motors to reach the building. Two men stays behind to hold the enemies back while they steered the aircraft away. The mimics catches up and kills the remaining soldier, leaving only Ritowski and Cage alive. They crash into the building and runs towards the location of the Omega, while the alien chases after them. They make it to the parking garage right on top of the Omega which is submerged in the flood. However, they cannot advance forward as an Alpha blocks their way. Ritowski volunteers to sacrifice herself to lure the Alpha away but Case disagrees. She tells him this is what she has to do in order to end the war. She wishes that she could have met Cage in better circumstances and gives him a kiss before running off. The Alpha chases her away and kill her immediately. Cage takes this opportunity to jump into the water. He swims towards the Omega as the Alpha chases him close behind. He gets stabbed by the mimic but he smiles as he releases the pins of the grenades. The Omega explodes and all the mimics drop dead right away. Before Cage passes out, the Omega's blood fuses with his body turning his eyes black. He wakes up again this time in the helicopter on his way to meet the general. He looks to the news and sees that the war has ended. The large explosion happened in the morning and all the mimics are disabled. He goes to J Squad and sees all his teammates alive and well. He goes to Ritowski's squad and sees her in the same place. He walks towards her as she gets back up. She asks him what he wants, but Cage said nothing, as he's so overwhelmed with happiness. So what do you guys think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below. If you like my video please press like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time.